A legal expert in workplace harassment complaints is now turning the spotlight on the CBC. Janice Rubin has been hired to lead the internal investigation into allegations against Jian Ghomeshi. Allegations like one woman has now made. She says she called attention to inappropriate behavior to a CBC colleague in 2010 and says she was met with stagnation. Tonight, Joanna Remiliotis brings us details of those allegations and the bigger questions they raise.
There's no sign left of Jian Ghomeshi at the CBC, not the obvious kind. The big glossy posters, all gone. Much harder to scrub away the questions that refuse to go away. What did CBC managers know? And if they knew, what did they do about allegations of sexual harassment in this very building? That is now under a CBC investigation.
For a famously outspoken guy.
The allegations date back to 2010. CBC News has spoken to a woman who worked with a former host of Q, who alleges Ghomeshi sexually harassed her. The woman, who asked to remain anonymous, says on one occasion in 2007, after he noticed her yawning during a morning meeting, Ghomeshi leaned in and made this lewd comment to her. That same day, as they walked to the studio, she alleges Ghomeshi made this other crude remark. And she claims on at least one occasion, he physically groped her. Afraid to speak out, the woman says she only confided in close friends and colleagues. But in 2010, she says she had enough and approached a colleague knowledgeable with union affairs for advice. She told him about Ghomeshi's inappropriate behavior. The woman did not file a formal complaint and recently reached out to that colleague, Timothy Neeson. CBC News has obtained recent email correspondence between them. In an exchange that began in July, Neeson wrote her saying he remembers their initial conversation. In an email dated October 28th, Neeson wrote he remembers her telling him about Jian behaving inappropriately verbally in attitude toward you. But the next day he added, I have no recollection of you telling me about physical touching, and that is not information that I would have excluded from any of my conversations with anyone. In the same email, he says the information was passed verbatim to the CBC radio manager and also verbatim to the Q executive producer. Senior management, he wrote, is now aware of those conversations. The details of those conversations are unclear and now under investigation. In an email to CBC News, the executive producer of Q, Arif Noorani, insists at no point was an allegation of sexual harassment brought to my attention. As of today, Noorani has taken time off while the CBC looks into the matter. A CBC spokesperson confirmed the CBC is looking for more clarity around the woman's allegations in 2010. Clarity is difficult to find. CBC News has made repeated requests for more information to both the union and management, including who is the unnamed radio manager referred to in the emails. In fact, on Friday, in a staff memo, CBC executive Heather Conway said last summer the CBC had conducted an internal investigation about Ghomeshi's behavior in the workplace. Conway says the investigation determined that there were no complaints of this nature about Jian's behavior in the workplace. Today, the president of the CBC refused to comment on the 2010 allegations, but reiterated the CBC has hired an employment law firm to investigate any allegations of harassment in the CBC.
It will be transparent, that the recommendations will come out. They will be shared with us at SET, senior executive team. The board will be informed, and Canadians will be informed, because this is very, very important.
In this muddied story, the bigger question left now, was there a culture of complicity that turned a blind eye to a star's inappropriate behavior? The woman who complained in 2010 did meet with the executive producer of Q and says Noorani suggested they find a way to make her workplace less toxic. She goes on to say she felt Noorani's hands were tied. I think we all realized we were fairly powerless in the face of Jian's primacy over the show, our executive producer included. Noorani won't confirm if that meeting even took place. CBC News has also spoken to another former CBC employee and a current CBC employee who claimed Ghomeshi was sexually aggressive and abusive in the workplace. One told us she was afraid to speak out. The other says she raised her concerns with a supervisor and says that conversation went nowhere. That supervisor has since retired and we have been unable to make contact. Joanna Remiliotis, CBC News, Toronto.